Again, my name is Jody Blank, and before we start, I want everyone to pull out the sheet that looks like this. I don't know if you have pens on you, but just take, does anyone not have a sheet? You don't? That one? Okay. And just go through it really quickly. Just take 2 minutes. It's just going to help you take some inventory on where you are at in your busy life. When you finish up, just take kind of a quick count of how many you have checked off. We all set? Okay, so this is what I always start off with in all of my presentations because it kind of helps you sit down and take a look at what your life looks like. I'm assuming the first reason you're here is because you're all busy, or you wouldn't be here. You'd be somewhere else taking advantage of a different speaker. So I want to ask, how many people had checked about 0 to 5? Okay. Anyone have 6 to 10 of those marked off? 11 to 15? There's 21, I think. Anyone have 16 or above? Yeah. Okay. So I think it's really interesting for those of us who have, all of us are busy to some extent. For those of you who are the 0 to 5 range, it sounds like you have probably some good systems set in place, but you're still here and you're looking to get some information about how you can make sure that you have more balance in your life. Anyone here, well, let me go here first. What I do that's different than other people, you've probably heard other people speak about doing some different things to manage your time better, like maybe time blocking or the Pomodoro effect. Have you heard of any of those things before? Okay. And I've heard of all those too. But why my approach is different and unique is because I talk to you about mindset strategies and things that you can do to make sure that you are in a good state of mind throughout your life. I'm going to give you some unique tools. We'll talk about the other handout that I have here too. And you're going to learn from my system in simple steps. Now, I just want to tell you up front that I have about 12 steps in my full system. We don't have time to go through all of them today, but I am going to give you a lot of things that you can take away to start making some changes in your life as you leave. Who is this session for? It's for those of you who don't want your business to run your lives anymore. You don't want to be stuck in a constant state of overwhelm. And if you're ready to set some boundaries for yourself and maybe for your employees as well. And I want to talk a little bit first about why we are so busy nowadays. And there's lots of different reasons why we're busy, and I'm sure if I asked each of you in this room why you were busy, you'd give me a lot of different answers, what's going on in your life. But the thing that we all have in common in this room is that when we talk about our lives, probably one of the biggest words that we use is that we're busy. And when you talk to somebody that you haven't seen in a while, you're like, how are you? And the person's like, oh my gosh, I'm so busy. And you're like, I know, so am I. And that's like how it is in society. And honestly, in our society, in American society, it is kind of like, I'm sure you've heard this before, but it is a badge of honor. So when we talk about how busy we are, it's kind of like, I'm busy because, I have a lot of things to do and it makes me feel important. And that's really what I had to come to terms with when I started thinking about why my life was so impossibly insane all the time. Now, the one other thing I want to talk to you about is that we all have what I like to call this sort of belief cloud about how we feel about being busy. So before I go through all this, I want to just kind of tell you what that means. And what that means is that as I'm standing here and I'm being taped, all of you are going to see me standing here, and the only thing that you're all going to have in common is that you would all agree I'm standing here in front of you, saying words, talking. Now, as I start to talk and as you start to think about some of the things that are going on in your life, you're going to start to form this sort of a belief cloud around the only real truth, that's me standing in front of you talking. And as you leave, everyone's going to have a different opinion of what I have to say today. So person A is going to be like, oh, I think what she had to say was, I'm going to think about that, but I've got a lot of other things I need to do while I'm here. I'll come back to that later. Person B is going to be like, I honestly don't have even any time to think about that right now, so they're going to go on their merry way. Person C is going to be like, whatever she said, I'm going to start doing on Monday, and they're going to take it and go with it. And person D may be like, I don't really know how I feel about what she said, and they'll talk to other people and they'll form their opinions based on what other people say about the presentation. So my point in telling you this is that in every situation in life, we base all of what our opinions are and our beliefs are on certain truths. And I'm going to share a story with you about how I came to realize why I'm so busy. It's kind of personal, but I think maybe you all might relate to it if you really sit down and think about it. But when I was about 17 years old, I was trying to figure out why or what I was going to do with my life. So I decided I was going to go to college, and my dad sat me down at the table and he said, listen, I don't think college is the right thing for you. I think that women don't really need to go to college. I don't think that's something that you really should focus on. And really, why don't you just try to find a rich guy to marry? And so, of course, everyone would come away from that conversation differently. Now, I want to say my dad is not a bad guy. He is wonderful. He would do anything for me. It's just what his belief system was. Now, we kind of all go, when we hear this story, we're like, oh my gosh, how could anyone ever say that? But I started to form my whole belief system based on that conversation. That wasn't really even true. I didn't even have to listen to what he had to say, but what it actually did was drove me to a point of almost a breakdown. And when I decided that I needed to make a change and I was the only one who could make that change, I really had to take a look at that. And I'm totally forgiving of him. I feel like why the conversation that we had was really meant to drive me to where I am today. And I really believe nothing really ever happens without having a reason. So that was my reason. But as we're talking about busy, I just want you to maybe think about some of the things that you may have built up beliefs about being busy and taking on a lot in your lives. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk mostly about productivity today. We don't have time to talk about all 4 pillars, but what I teach is with my clients is that there are 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars are productivity, Self-care, which is, there's a lot of things included in self-care, but I also include spirituality in that. And there's business, career, and relationships. We're going to touch on each one of these things a little bit, but productivity is what we're going to spend most time on. But as we start to look at these 4 pillars in our life, and we start to make some changes, what we want to do is to gravitate toward that tiny little diamond in the middle, because that's a sweet spot of where life really is the best. Okay. So my promise to you is that you're going to leave here with some clear strategies to start you on your journey to break your busy. Now, the one thing that you're going to tell me as we start going through some of this is that you don't have the time, or you don't know how to implement some of these things because you just have way too much going on. And I can tell you, I know exactly where you're coming from. I'll get to that part of my story in a little bit. My background, I don't see anyone that I recognize in here, but what my career is I work in the international exchange world. So I am a regional manager. I manage 7 states. I have about 300 students coming into the country at any given time to work at entry-level jobs. I also hire and train my own team of people in all of those areas to help me take care of students. And multiple other things. I travel about 85 days a year. And I do this. So I have a lot going on too. And the other thing is, when I'm dealing with 18 to 20-year-old students and people, they're sort of on that verge of adulthood, kind of, but not really. I'm sure you've all worked with people in this age group. And so a lot of what I do is putting out fires while they're here. The goal is to take some of the strategies that I'm going to teach you here and put them to use immediately. The first thing I want to talk about, and something that I had to do when I was going down this road of trying to figure out how to better organize my life, because at a certain point, I was doing everything and I was not doing anything well. Can anyone relate to that? Yeah. Okay. So one of the first strategies that I put into place was the 90-91 rule. Has anyone ever heard of that before? Okay. I'm sorry, I have to take a drink of water here. The 90-91 rule, thank you, is for the first 90 minutes of every day for 90 days, you focus on your one big task that you need to finish for that day. And the reason I had to do this, and maybe some of you do this too, but when you first get into work for the workday, a lot of us will sit and maybe answer emails and do some of those things that you don't really feel like doing, but you do that right away in the beginning of the morning. But the most productive time of the day, there's all kinds of research that shows, is the first 90 minutes of your workday. So as I went down this road, I had to rearrange my schedule, and this is something that I work on with my clients too, is how can we rearrange that schedule so that those first 90 days or 90 minutes of your day, you're really going to accomplish something that needs to happen. Now, as I started with this, I was kind of all over the board, and I realized a couple of things, that in those first 90 minutes, when you get on the internet, like you're saying you're answering emails, but suddenly you get lost in out of Facebook land or whatever it is in the morning, and you end up on maybe social media for 20 minutes longer than you want it to be. And so in the first 90 minutes, I always tell people, listen, stay away from your computers and your phones for those first 90 minutes, because you really need to focus in on that time and getting some things accomplished. Because I don't know about you, but I've had a to-do list that has not been finished for 2 years. It's like when you write a to-do list, You get to the end of that day and you're like, oh, I still have 6 things to do, but now I got to add 6 more things to tomorrow, and it just never seems to end. So if you kind of reschedule how you look at things, that is going to really help you to be more productive. Case study is a client that I worked with. She came to me and she was working about 75 hours. I think she was probably working more than that as I talked to her. And she just never was able to accomplish that to-do list. She wasn't spending enough time with her family, and she was at a point of almost kind of like figuring out if she wanted to leave her job and go somewhere else in order to make some changes. But after I worked with her for 90 days, we got her down to actually where she could work a 40-hour work week. And I helped her to implement different team strategies to take some of those time-sucking things away from her and put them onto somebody else. And the other thing I want to really talk to you about is when we're saying yes to something, we're ultimately saying no to something else. So when you say yes to your friend who needs help moving, and that's fine, and maybe that's something that is one of the pillars in your life that you want to help people and you're okay with that, but ultimately that means that you're saying no to spending time with family. So no matter what you say yes to, there's always a no to something else. So if you implemented just this one thing, this one change starting when you get back, do you think that that would change your life just a little bit? Anyone? No, not really? No? You're saying no?
Well, the phone doesn't stop ringing. No.
I will get to that. Yes. Yes. My next one is be hard to reach. So listen, my phone rings all the time. I mean, I have, if you've known me at all in what I do for my business and my career, I get calls in the middle of the night with students that are in jail. I've had calls, maybe you know the story, from somebody who had a baby. Anyone know the story? Yes. So listen, I get it. My phone rings constantly, and that was one of the reasons that I was like, I just can't do this anymore. Now, when I say be hard to reach, I'm not saying you need to be hard to reach every single day. I'm not even saying you need to be hard to reach like one whole day. I'm saying within that 90-minute period, if your whole team knows that, hey, listen, in this 90 minutes, you're not going to be able to reach me unless it's an emergency that you cannot figure out on your own. And just giving you that space of that 90 minutes, and I do tell people when you're in that 90 minutes, don't put your phone in reach of your hands, okay? Like, you need to really refocus, and I know this is hard for you guys to like think through, and that's okay. But even if you start for 30 minutes, just keep your phone away from you for 30 minutes so you can accomplish something. Now, this is my little airplane. It's kind of ironic that I have an airplane on here today. But what happened with me and how I had to learn this the hard way was that when I was traveling to another country, I was leaving, and I had students coming within 2 days. So I left, and I had a group of 30 students coming while I was gone. And the person at the time that I had working for me, she decided to leave, and I had hired somebody new to take her position. And she was brand new, like 4 days old, new. And where I was going, I didn't have access to internet. No one could reach me. I was 12 hours opposite of where we are now. And I knew it was going to blow up. I totally knew it was going to blow up. And it did. But here's what happened. My team figured it out. They were not happy because that was the thing that I used to do for them. that was what I did. I protected them from that. I always said, listen, I don't have to, they shouldn't have to do that. I'm paying them to do this job. We're paying these people to do this job. And we have to switch our mindset. And, so it was a good probably 10 days. Actually, it was really only 3 days where it was rough for them. But those 3 days, if it was me, it would have been 10 because I would have had to do all their jobs plus my own. Okay, so 3 days, they took 3 days, they were mad. I got some pretty nasty emails. And then that was when I decided this cannot go on any longer. I'm their boss. No one should be talking to me like this. And so we had a conversation, and I wasn't mean, I wasn't angry or upset. I just said, hey, listen, you know what? Maybe this was my fault. I've been protecting you from this for a long time. But the fact is, this is your job. You had a really easy summer last year, but this is how the job is. And if you want to stay, I want you to stay. You're really important to me, and I know that you are good at what you do. It's just that you have to take responsibility for the job that you're getting paid for. And it was a hard conversation for me to have and for my employees to have. But you know what? I got back, and she has taken so much responsibility off of me that I don't have to worry about now because of this one conversation and because she learned how to do it because it blew up and she had to learn. Now, you can do that, wait for it to blow up, or you can put in steps to start to have those conversations with employees and maybe start to really think to yourself, how can I change? How can I change what I'm doing, and how can I make this look different than what I'm doing now? Back to, we were talking about putting your phone away or your phone ringing all the time. The one thing that happens when we are interrupted is it does take 21 minutes to get refocused. So if you have 90 minutes in the morning, if you save 90 minutes, or let's say you start out with 30, and you're interrupted, and it takes 21 minutes to get refocused back, that means you got 9 minutes left in that 30 minutes. If you're in those 90 minutes and you get 3 phone calls, it takes 21 minutes to refocus, and then you only have, what is it? I'm bad at math, 29 minutes left of that 90 minutes to really do what you need to get accomplished in that day. So I'm going to ask you again, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to start delegating more and be harder to reach at certain times? You can just answer in your head. I just want you to kind of think about it. Yeah?
Do you have an area if you have a lack of employees?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. If you have a lack of employees, then managers obviously can't leave without making sure those positions are filled, which 9 times out of 10, they just end up doing the job.
Right. So I don't have a specific slide in this here, but I do have ways, there are ways that you can put off some of those, like administrative duties and things. And there's I can't remember the name of it offhand. My brain isn't there right now, but I can get you that information. But there is a place overseas that you can hire people for $4 or $5 an hour to handle administrative tasks. So if you're interested in that, I can give you a website. You can look into it. And it really helps people that are in that position where you're dealing with administrative things. Now, it's outside of my career. This is something completely different. What I'm talking about is there's a couple of companies that deal with a place in the Philippines, and you can pay a Filipino person $4 or $5 an hour to do some of those administrative tasks. Now, one of the things that I want to just tell you is $4 or $5 an hour in their country is good pay. Like, to us, we're like, I would never do that. But it's a different economy and a different place in the Philippines, and that is good pay for them. You know, some people will say, you know what, I can afford to pay them $6 an hour, and you're probably going to get the best person there, and they're going to probably stay with you longer. So that's something to think about. I have other things too, but not enough time to get into all of that here. And then the last thing is to cut out 3 unnecessary tasks, which would be things like we just talked about, would be any administrative things that you could have somebody else take care of for you. For me, the tasks that I had to cut out were, I have students that text me, like, where can I find a towel? You know, like, go to Walmart, buy a towel. And I have them calling me and texting me this all throughout the night when they're here. They are, some of the things they ask me are funny. But what I had to do is set a boundary for myself and say, listen, I don't have the time to deal with 300 students. I have to have these people that I've hired, I have to have them help me talk to the students. So that is one of the things that is their job duty, is they talk with the students. I only step in if there is a big problem and a fire that needs to be put out. I will help them through that. But I also had to, when I gave this task to my employees, I also had to have the conversation with them. You don't have to answer them in the middle of the night. I helped them to set a boundary for themselves so that they didn't feel overwhelmed, because you don't want, I think that's probably a lot of what we experience as managers is, like, we don't want them to be overwhelmed and feeling like we do, so sometimes we take that on ourselves. But I helped them to set a boundary too. So I said, listen, you only take student phone calls, student messages between 2 and 5 in the afternoon. And then if somebody texts you at 7 o'clock and it's not important, you don't answer that until 2 o'clock the next day. Now, does this irritate students? Because they're a different generation. They want to have access. They have access in seconds to everything. So, but listen, if it's not important, they learn. They learn to just, sometimes they have to figure it out themselves too. And sometimes as a manager or business owner, you have to allow them to do that as well. So, okay, so I will, at the end, I will pass around a sheet that if you want my free ebook, because I do go into some of the stuff in more detail and you can look through it a lot easier. And also some of the stuff that I talk about here, it will be in front of you and you can just take it with you. So if you want it, you can just put your email in and I'll send that to you. I'll also send you guys a free coupon code for anything if you ever decide to work with me in the future. And lastly, I just want to talk about how there's sort of, as I've looked at and as I've worked with people, there's 4 different areas where I see people sort of struggle in this, and I call it the productivity quadrant. And the first area is, or the first person that I work with is usually the problem solver. And as you can see, like along the left-hand side, it's the level of consistency, and along the bottom is the level of productivity. So the problem solver is usually a high level of productivity, but a low level of consistency. And that's because when somebody is coming to you with the fires, you don't know when it's gonna happen. You're just gonna deal with it as it comes. But typically those people are very productive and they know how to handle those situations. So they are more on the high level of productivity. The second kind of person is the taskmaster, and this is the one who, their level of consistency is pretty good, but their level of productivity is pretty low because they are the ones who are kind of like standing there and being the taskmaster of everyone that's working under them. I've watched some of my clients before stand in a corner and have their employees come up to them and say, what do I do next? What do I do next? What do I do next? And she knew exactly what they were supposed to do, but they weren't able to, those people weren't able to have the confidence in the position that they were doing in order to figure it out on their own. So she had become like the taskmaster of everybody. And then we have the busybody, and that's the one who has low productivity and low consistency. And I'm going to tell you that was me. I'm going to be fully honest. That was me. That was, I would start one project and then a fire would come up and I would like, okay, I got to do this, and somebody would call me and they would need this, and I was all over the place. And because of that, at the end of the day, I was feeling like I was never getting anything done. And I would go to bed. I don't know if any of you have ever done this before, and I was so tired. I couldn't sleep because I was thinking about all of the stuff that I either didn't get to, or I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot to do that. I forgot to email this person back. Oh my gosh, I forgot to do this. And then I would go like through this list in my head as I'm trying to lay in bed and sleep. I know none of you have ever gone through that, right? So these are the 3 different levels, and the last one is the one that I think we all kind of want to work towards. It's being time rich, or we want to be more productive, and so that we can have more time with our families. And this is the person who has high level of productivity and a high level of consistency. They have things set in place for their teams, so their teams know and understand what they need to do on a daily basis without asking them every single day. And you also have a team of people, like you are the person who actually trusts your team to do things. Now, again, you may have to realize that you may have to watch them fail, and they may get upset about that, but that is the only way to free up some of your time and some of your energy and get some freedom for yourself. So I'm going to ask you to mentally ask yourself, where are you on the productivity quadrant? And I'm just going to show it to you again. And where do you want to be? Okay, just want to run through quickly again the 90-91 rule. That is when you take 90 minutes for the next 90 days and you just focus on that one thing that you want to accomplish. You want to be hard to reach sometimes during the day and allow your team to know that you're going to be hard to reach during those times. And then try to figure out how to cut 3 unnecessary tasks out of your to-do list and either hire somebody to do them, help you do them, or think of a better way to dole out those tasks. And as you're, I know you guys all have a sheet that you fill out as you, at the end. So just as you're going through that sheet and as you leave here today, I want you to think about what has been the most valuable here, what you feel like you can take and start right away when you leave. Now, I realize that some of you may be like, there isn't anything that I want to do. I don't have the time to. But there are some of you who will leave here and just implement one thing, and you may see something that will change in your life. But what I hope that usually when I'm speaking to a group for the first time, what happens is they start to think a little bit differently about how they're looking at things. They walk away from this and they're thinking to themselves, okay, so she does have a point about this team thing, and you start to just think a little bit about it. And maybe that means to you that you just get my ebook and you want to learn more. Maybe that means to you that you're just going to leave and just make some changes in your thought patterns, and that is exactly what I'm here for today, just to get you to kind of think differently about your life and how you're living it, and maybe some things that you want to change. Does anyone have questions? No? Okay. The last thing I want you to think about is that if you don't start to make some changes, where will you be in a year from now? Probably the same, right? Probably just as busy as you are now, maybe busier. Maybe you've taken on more. What I just want you to think about is if you don't make some changes, it's going to be really hard to keep living that life. I know. I've been there. I was very close to a breakdown. And when I started this work, and when I started to make this change on my own, I had to have a real conversation with myself and my family, because my husband sat down with me and he said, listen, now I was 45 pounds heavier at the time too. And he said, listen, you can't keep living like this. I can't keep living with you like this. Like, we got to figure something out. And he said, okay, this is hard, but he said, you're overweight. I don't care about your weight, but I know you do. And he said, if you don't start taking care of yourself, you can't take care of your kids. You can't be with me. You got to figure it out. He's like, I'll help you, but we got to do this together. And I'll tell you what, I cried for 2 weeks. And I probably ate 20 pints of ice cream. And then I said, you know what? He's right. I'm digging my own grave. So I just decided I'm going to change. And I will tell you, it's taken me from when I started, that was about 18 months ago. And I figured this out on my own. I read books. I paid a life coach. I learned, as I learned some of this stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, so many people were struggling with this that I know. I need to figure this out and help others to do that. So I learned how to, through my own team management and the experience that I had there, that is where my coaching experience lies, is in that area, but also in coaching person to person. And I'll tell you, my career, I hated it. You probably know this. And I was asking myself every day, what am I going to do? I got to get out of this. So what I did was I learned how to coach. But as I learned and as I started to build my team and as I started to work with a coach myself, I started to like my job again, because I started to learn the tools that I needed to do in order to give myself some freedom. And you have to start somewhere. And what I learned is that I love working with the employers that I work with. I love working with the students most days. The women that I work with are some of the most incredible people that I've ever met, ever. So that is what I had to start with. I had to start with some of the things that I enjoy. Maybe you should think about maybe some of the reasons that you started your business, or you started this job, or wherever you are, and try to go back to that. Ask yourself, what is important to me? Why did I love this, and why did I want to do this in the first place? And that will help you to really change your mind. So thank you, everyone. Just want to say thank you. Yep, have a good afternoon.